Welcome back to Ballistic Autistic Podcast. This is your anonymous autistic host, and you know what? I kind of went a little in between longer than I thought I was going to. I wanted to try and do a week, but it's like, you know, I just want to kind of come on when I feel like it and have more thoughts. And one of the things I've been kind of thinking about more is kind of like my abilities as someone on the spectrum, and I wish I could get more input as someone, who obviously isn't autistic, and comparatively as far as the self-examination, just kind of like the one thing I've been thinking about, especially within my marriage. Quickly, I've been married 11 years. Got married really young. Uh, so I guess you kind of get an idea of my overall age. I got married at 20, and you know, there's certain things like I just had to start off right off. I have the most amazing wife, and I guess it's kind of the reason I'm kind of bringing up my marriage in this podcast episode is because I can't remember the name of the website. And I remember seeing this because I'm always on the autism and Asperger's subreddit groups of Reddit, and there's this one website run by a lady who I think the website may be called Autistic Husbands or Psychopaths, but something like that, or Autistics or Psychopaths, or something along that nature. And it was just like really kind of it's crazy website. She has blog posts upon blog posts about why someone shouldn't marry someone on the spectrum, and I'd never give it much thought, but it's like as a podcast progresses, you want to continue to have new episodes and talking about different things that come to mind. And I was like, maybe I should take this opportunity to kind of just be a little more introspective and thinking about, my marriage, my wife, my ability to commingle with someone, because it's difficult for a lot of people on the spectrum, and it's kind of like what I talked about in the first episode and a little bit in the second. There's that difficulty of being uncomfortable with discomfort. Some autistic people, I mean, they're quirky. Um, I mean, like I talked about on that Love on the Spectrum, like one dude took a date. This guy's super into dinosaurs. Took her to a museum all on dinosaurs, talked nothing but dinosaurs, and didn't really realize to get to know someone, you can't just talk about yourself. I mean, the poor girl got stuck in a who knows how long that date went. I mean, we're talking about 10 minutes at most on a couple few clips on Netflix, where it could have been 10 hours touring the dinosaur museum. Obviously, she was never really super enthusiastic about being there. You can't blame her if it's not her interest. I'm really surprised the show didn't have like, oh, they're interested in this. Let's find someone with the same exact interest. But it is what it is. But talking and communicating, because that has happened with me where I've had my shutdowns. This happened 2-3 times where I've had issues with work or something come up where it's just I've had that shutdown mode where I'm like, okay, I just need to block everything out, and my poor wife had to do so much coasting. What's the word? I can't think of the word, but really, I mean, she was just determined just not to let me be in that lockdown mode, the shutdown mode. I mean, I can still remember the times I had that issues, growing up, middle school. Yeah, a lot of it was middle school, a bit of high school, with writing essays or whatever. And it was, to her, without really thinking about it, to her, it was scary. I mean, it's difficult to see someone. I mean, again, it's kind of hard for me to imagine because I've never had to see it. But I'm trying. Again, this is gonna be a very introspective episode, I guess. Someone cut themselves off, disassociate, to see that and he wonders, like, is this a psychotic break? Is this like what's going on here? And she's not prepared. She has no background in dealing with people with disabilities, and I mean, her greatest quality is, and her greatest strength is her genuine kindness. I mean, that's what immediately attracted me to her. And that's another thing, I'm thinking about, I've been thinking about my marriage a lot lately, just as far as like, okay, what do I want to talk about on the podcast? And it's like, yeah, what do I like about my wife? What do I love about my wife? And the one thing that never changed about her is her genuine kindness. Uh, it's unparalleled. Really, really, it's unparalleled even to myself. I think I'm a kind person. I'm giving and thoughtful, but so before I keep rambling, keep saying the same thing, I got to keep moving on. So you know, thinking about that, thinking about my contribution to the marriage, and I mean, every couple has fights because we're different people, and certain things are going to get frustrated. You're going to be frustrated about different things with a different person, and and I've just been like thinking, you know, I guess a part of the podcast is like addressing it, and then hopefully those that are recognizing that they're having issues with their marriage, and they want to know how to improve, and this is kind of like the whole point, I guess, is that I want to put this out there as publicly as possible, obviously keeping myself anonymous, but the whole point is yes, I want to be a better husband. I have my strengths as a husband, but I also have my faults, and sometimes you don't recognize the strengths within a relationship, and for the most part, because they're their strengths, they're just so on autopilot of they do what they do without thinking about it, that they go unrecognized. And I've been trying to lately, because I was like, I wanted to try and address it before I came on and did this episode. It's like I wanted to try and be more complimentary to my wife, and so that's kind of like my challenge to anyone who reads this. Like, what can you do to take the time to be that self-introspective, but then going from there, asking the big questions like, what can I do? Because marriage rates are so bad. They're 50%. I mean, they say they're 50%, but there's kind of a weird thing with statistics. I think the more interesting factor is like the percentage of divorce rate goes in higher the more marriages someone goes through, which I find actually very interesting. It's like, why do you keep putting yourself through these marriages when it's like the next one has a higher statistical probability of failing? I mean, it's just, why is this such a predominant thing going on with so many marriages, in modern Western countries? I mean, just speaking to the United States, I mean, it is inevitably high. I mean, who doesn't know a close friend or family member that has a divorce? My parents got divorced when I was in high school, and but I mean, a big difference with that. I mean, as open and honest as I can be, my dad wasn't the greatest husband, good father for the most part. He's a difficult he's a man with his own history and problems, just like all of us. I've never really had to dwell on his past mistakes. He was, when I came around, because there's a big difference between my older siblings and myself. And the fact that I had disability, he was there for me very much more so, and than my older siblings. There was that 10-year, well, a little bit more 10-year gap between us, so there was kind of like that time for him to try. I guess I was kind of like a second chance at trying to be a better father. My brother and sister have their history with him, and then I have mine. So I mean, they definitely had seen him in a different light, and I mean, I saw some of his negative qualities, and I mean, for the most part, I believe that all three of us can agree that he's definitely very much a changed man, and that's kind of one of the things, like, people can change. There's always that adage like people never change. No, they do, or at least they're capable of it. I think people are capable of changing, but then there's the people who just don't want to change. I was recently, my wife and I were binging through, finding new shows. One of the things we found was the series 4400, and I remember this from the early 2000s. I think it came out in 2004, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, 4 seasons. Anyway, one of the characters had an issue with a gentleman who was the one character was black, and he was dating a white woman, and he was in the military, and his military comrades found out, and they beat him up for it. And of course, if anyone knows the premise of the 4400, it's basically a bunch of people over decades being abducted. They don't know by what, and all of a sudden they're dropped off in the middle of I think it was like a lake or a pond or something, and so they come back. So this guy was abducted in the 50s, I think, so Vietnam War or something like that. Anyway, all the other guys in his platoon were, like I mentioned, were white. They finally met up and with him, and they apologized. But then he went back to the one guy who was actually very racist. He's like, "Nah, I just don't like you." You know, so that he's a person who just didn't want to change. So I mean, there are, again, I guess my main point is there are going to be people who don't want to change, and they don't want to. I guess they're, yeah. That's like I said, there are everyone's capable of changing. It comes down to if you want to. And so, like I said, with this introspective, it's like what I want to change, or at least what I want to be better. I'm not trying to change myself entirely per se, is because I know I'm a good person. I think predominantly most people are. People have their preferences in life, and they don't like the change of those things. Um, I mean, look at COVID, what it's done to the world. I mean, if you didn't like change before, this really forced change on in a very grand scale. I mean, you have people's change in economic status. You have people's change in um, schooling status. Ability to go outside. I mean, there's people who rightfully so are afraid to go outside because of their current possible pre-existing health conditions, that they're being susceptible to it. Oh, sorry, I just burped. Oh, to so so just going back, I'm rambling and losing track. So my main point is, thinking about myself, and you know, so one of the things, yeah. So I talked about, trying to do better with compliments, because my wife has talked about, she feels like she has to drag compliments out of her, and I've been trying for the last several days to be a little bit more reminding her and saying without the cues, because that's the thing. It's like I used to fight her on it, essentially, like I love you, but that's obviously not enough for her, and I needed to take that into account. It's like, well, if it's not enough for her, like if I do love her, why can't I make a simple sacrifice of doing something that will genuinely mean something to her? So reminding her and telling her and meaning it, that I look at her and say I love her, tell her she's beautiful, tell her she's smart, tell her she's a hard worker and a good wife. And then the other part that now comes beyond just words, my actions helping with the house. Like I'll admit I'm really bad with words. I'm not very organized, and I get into my mind, like I have my little nook and cranny, especially like in the office. I have my setup where I'm doing my podcast and I do my photo editing and video editing, and when we have those times in between, she goes and runs errands if she doesn't need me, and I just have a chance to relax and be peace and quiet. Not so much now that we have two kittens that are driving us up the wall sometimes. Yeah, I'm talking about you too. Um, you know, Trying my best to continue the introspective of recognizing, what she. It's not really what she expects from me, but what I should expect for myself to be a partner in our marriage, and hopefully, that's kind of the hard part, with being proactive and contributing. And I'll be one to admit, like I combat my laziness a lot. It's not that I'm not a hard worker. It's just like when I go to work, I have this roadblock of like, okay, I did that job. Can't I just be done with everything else, because that was so hard to me and so draining? Can't I just ignore all this other stuff? But that's not fair to her, because she works hard, super hard. Her job isn't obviously it's not physical, because she's very fortunate. I'm glad for her that she gets a nice office job where she can, not kill her body, and and that's great for her health, minus sitting down, because sitting down for super long periods of time is bad for your health as well. So I try to encourage her. That's why I call her in between throughout my day when I can. It's like, hey, if have you taken your breaks, please get up and walk around the house or something. But to what I've been thinking about is, it's kind of like using this as an option. It's like putting it out there, promising. It's like, hey, I want to work on this. are you struggling with this too? Let's work on it together, and we continue to build and strengthen our relationships, because everyone's relationships struggle at some point. Nothing's perfect forever. You have your perfect moments and you hold on to them, and you put them up on your memory wall of all those great memories, and you try to really hold on to those, and use those as reminders, like, why was it great at this point? And that's the problem, I think, with some marriages is, you married them and loved them at some point. So what happened? Why can't you get back there? I mean, think about all the people that get their divorce that they've been desperately wanting, and then they start taking care of themselves. Like, let's say, like, they start getting really fat in their marriage. As soon as they're divorced, like, think about how many, like, they get in shape. They start dieting. They start eating. Because they're going back and they want to start dating again. It's like, well, you couldn't have done that in your marriage to get better for yourself, and in essence getting better for them, being healthy for them, being caring about your self-worth with them. But it only matters now that because they're gone, and you're trying to get someone back in your life. That's when it matters, because you made that mistake. At least that's the idea and thoughts going through my head. So it's, like, me personally, I definitely have a weight issue now, and that's a prime example. It's like, eating and dieting, and it's challenging because it's ridiculous, because I know I have the discipline. I did was it this year or last year? I did a 30-day 30-pound weight loss challenge. I lost 27 pounds in that 30 days. Technically I lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks, because I started kind of getting a jump start 2 weeks prior. So I did lose 30 pounds in technically what's 14, so that's 42 days, I guess, whatever it is. 44 days, a month and a half. I lost 30 pounds in a month and a half. So it's like, but you gotta find that transition of that hard work and becoming the habit, so that you don't feel miserable, because it was pretty miserable on me, But it was also like my time felt so sucked away from things, from being lazy. That's the one thing I'm kind of realizing and coming to, is like, those times where I was disciplined, was it did it feel like it was just sucking away my time because I wasn't, doing the things I liked, or was it sucking away the time from the things that just made me lazy, like just like being on my phone so much? And that's the one thing I've been trying for the last few days. Is my wife has complained to me, and I really shouldn't say complain, but address it, because she deserves definitely my attention. And I mean, we're dating; she got my attention. So what's happened now is I've become complacent of just having her there, and I don't want to lose out on that. By, like, she's here, so what's wrong with being on my phone? But by being on my phone, then I'm not with her. I'm there in body, not in spirit. So it's, one of those things. Another thing I'm trying to work on, with because we watched that Social Dilemma. That's where really kind of, I think, where it kind of started out. It's like that Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix. Fantastic. I mean, a lot of the stuff I already knew. I think they just did a good job of, kind of just being open and honest. It's kind of ridiculous. Like, oh yeah, this thing's really horrible. This thing that we were part of building and creating, and because now we don't work for them and not making any money off of them. Like, oh yeah, but by the way, this thing sucks, and you shouldn't be doing it, even though we created it and made lots of money. We now get to make some more money. I don't know if they got paid for the interviews. Probably they didn't. It's probably, but it's just kind of ironic to. It's the arsonist lighting the fire and saying, "Oh no, the house is on fire. We should put it out." It's just it's a little ridiculous at the same time, because I mean, social media is such a new thing, and phones are a new thing. I mean, think about it. Well, the iPhone come out. Actually, I remember the iPod came out with, like, 2001, and big blocky white thing. I think the iPhone came out, what was it, 2007-ish, 2004, 2005, I can't really remember. But, social media, smartphones are a brand new thing. And we really don't know the psychological effect that they're having on our psyche and our ability to socially interact. There have been, the internet's probably one of the greatest inventions of mankind, because despite what's going on in the world today with such divisiveness, and people are so keen on picking sides, that kind of forget what it can do to really bring people together, people with common interests. I mean, that's why, I love my hobbies, and I get into, like, I found great strong communities in photography, and now, or when I did cycling, as no one probably can imagine, a big 6'2" guy doing cycling, um, and then also with archery, but at the same time, you kind of look at them. I don't think we're prepared for all the sarcasm and attacks. Like, sometimes in these groups, in these communities, these niche communities, and I can't, and I imagine it's the same in any kind of niche community. There's gonna be those that just are sarcastic and attacking in a sense, and there are those who aren't looking for that. They're not looking for that to happen to them, and it can affect them emotionally. Words do have a power. That's why we have amazing literature. That's why we have amazing movies, because someone wrote that script. Words do have power. That's where social change starts with words and ends with action. And so it's kind of like, okay, what do I want to say, and how do I want to act? And so what I want to do is, say I want to be the best husband I can be, and then acting in accordance. And it's challenging, and that's, you're fighting the human condition, especially of complacency. That's one of the greatest things. I mean, you see that in politics. I mean, there's a reason why women only got the ability to vote 100 years ago. There's a certain place of complacency. There's a reason why you have wives' tales of, think about some of the stupid things we were told as a kid. Oh, you turn the little lamp on in the car, and parents yell, "You gotta turn it off. It's against the law." Never was. Or you're sitting too close in front of the TV. It's bad for your eyes. Never was. Cracking your knuckles is gonna give you arthritis. No scientific proof of that. Just we make things up out of possible mild irritations and blatant lies, and then become this folklore of truth, when in reality it's based on a delusion of lies. And so it's just, why not try to do better? I mean, isn't that what we all really want? We're finding that meaning in our lives. That's why I'm, like, trying to do my best to look into that autistic apartment complex idea with the different functions of helping with employment, and also emotional and financial support. Trying to find that niche of calling / career where you find your purpose. Instead of just floating through life, enjoying ourselves, and it's just, you're working towards one point in time to do this one thing that's kind of exciting, and then you've done it, and then what? I mean, that's not what vacation kind of is. You sometimes feel like you're slowly killing yourself to do this one thing, because you're trying to escape the main thing of your life, because that's overall miserable. So, I'm going to continue to work on that aspect of my life, as I imagine many others are doing the same thing. And that's just, the best that we can do is just continue to hope. So that, I guess, continue to do what you can, and don't stop, because that's the thing. It's like that complacency, that halt in doing better is really what can harm you as a person, and harm a relationship with people. I mean, sometimes relationships fail because people were never genuinely right for each other. But, I mean, you were right for each other at one point. I mean, weren't you? I mean, that's why, at least I'm thinking about that with my marriage right now, and it's just like, okay, yeah, I can do better, and I have been better. I mean, I was an amazing boyfriend. So it's like, where did that person go? Like, I was able to do that. Why can't I do it now? There's no reason that I can't do it now. So, get the flowers maybe every couple weeks and surprise her. Just instead of asking what's for dinner or even asking her where do you want to go, just take the initiative and just go there. And if they didn't, there's no real risk there. There's that. If anything, it's just showing that assertiveness and showing leadership. I mean, a marriage is a partnership. Well, at least in my beliefs, someone has to take the reins sometimes. Otherwise, it's just a ping pong of indecisiveness, and I mean, no one likes that. No one wants to. Have you ever gone to a group dinner with friends? You're like, what do you want to eat? Where do you want to eat? You're like, wow, do you like that? Or do you like that? And then no one wants to make a decision because they're afraid to, like, oh, I don't want to accidentally take them somewhere they don't want to be, and then them hating the evening. And it's like, I mean, if they really didn't want the evening to be miserable, then they could have obviously spoken up and acted like, actually, I would love to go here. Or, everyone likes going to a new place. Try going, like, okay, have I been to this restaurant? Let's go to this restaurant. Just find a way to break that indecisiveness. So, yeah, I mean, thinking about myself and what I plan on trying to do, it's like I want to keep up with the compliments for my wife. And I want to keep up with, some more, I guess, jumping in without being asked. And it is hard for me, just with autistic, because, like, I'm not looking for it, and I have a different level of comfort as far as, tidiness, unfortunately. Mine, I can get things a little bit messier, but then, like, I get to the point, then I go full hog, and then I clean myself up. Unfortunately, it's like, I need to learn to, it doesn't need to get to that point, and it needs to be able to learn to jump in sooner, especially for her own mental health and for, and a clean home is better for everyone. I mean, I think that's true. Like, I mean, who doesn't feel better when the house has been cleaned and tidied up, and floors are vacuumed and mopped, and everything's put away, clothes are folded, and it's just working on that. And it's a challenge, and I mean, that's kind of the thing with the people on the spectrum. I think is, I don't think I'm unique in any aspect, and I am kind of curious of how those atypical, non-quirky, I don't know what to call them, people not on the spectrum, normal people, regular folks, of thoughts and feelings as far as being able to match each other. But then again, it's like, what does it really matter? Because, like, everyone is so different. But and one of the things I'm kind of thinking about is, like, despite the only thing in the world that's changed is technology. Technology has changed. The same problems still exist, especially within a relationship. The challenges of deciding on growing your family and having kids. Interactions with the in-laws, it's like, do your in-laws like me? Do my in-laws like you? Or, vice versa, just thinking about, concern of, like, oh, whose parents like each other? And then, and then the same problems of an open and honest, communicated relationship with your spouse, infidelity, and, I mean, these are all the same problems that have been around for forever. None of that has changed. So, it's still the same things, What's really changed? Technology's changed. People haven't. The people's problems have slightly skewed to a different spectrum. I mean, look at the suicidal rates, self-harming rates of teenagers because of social media. But what's really the problem there? It's the self-image, the depression of, like, oh, I think they seem happier than me, so that makes me sad. There's that failure of teaching children. It's like, and this is a very universal truth. I know I'm not saying anything prophetic here. It's just like, you need to be happy with yourself before you can be happy with someone else. And sometimes we jump into a relationship before that happens, and then it makes that relationship, that journey, sometimes have a bumpy road. Fortunately, I was fairly, I'm going to be honest, fairly happy with myself. I might have jumped in too soon with my wife. But, I mean, there was just so many good things about her, and she was just such beautiful and lovely, and there's, I mean, I definitely never did not make a mistake marrying her. You know, well, I mean, sometimes I think I should made the mistake marrying me because I feel like I'm the one with more problems. I mean, we all have our level of crazy. We all have our crazy family. Negate that, I guess I can just end this with just saying, I have been insanely blessed and insanely fortunate, and I have an insanely loving wife that works so hard. Um, and I feel bad sometimes because she has an uncanny ability of not being aware of her own strengths and self worth. And I mean, everyone has, I guess, or there's going to be those that struggle with that. And the only thing I know that'll continue to help to contribute to her finding that and feeling better about herself is being a better husband. That's where, and maybe that's where some, might find that kind of interesting, or maybe you'll find it maybe helpful in your own relationship or marriage of, it's as husbands, or at least as men, and this, I always, like, as I keep talking about, like, I'm never sure, I'm always wonder, the men are fixers. I'm using air quotes here, people. Fixers. We want to fix things. We hear a problem, we want to fix it. And I've definitely tried, because people like talk about, you hear different aspects or different places where you might hear relationship advice where women just want you to listen sometimes. And that's true. I mean, people just like to vent. I mean, that's kind of why I'm doing the podcast, is like, this is my ability to think out loud / vent / make these goals for myself, because, you put it out there. And sometimes people say, like, don't post something or don't make such a declaration unless you've kind of started that initial step. Because, like, take resolutions, for example, of people who want to say, oh, it's a resolution to lose weight. Well, they haven't really taken it. It's like, why not start with, like, and not just lose weight. Like, my goal is this next 2 weeks not to eat out, no fast food, or I tried keto. I mean, keto was actually really great. I tried different dietary stuff because to see what kind of helps with my overall brain function. So keto was actually really nice, and I definitely want to get back towards it. It was difficult a lot of the time, though, because it was a little challenging with the fats, and oh my god, bread is delicious. And so, and then I, trying more probiotics, because I read a really amazing dietary book about probiotics, and also, the kind of stuff on gluten and why it, affects the stuff. But I was learning more about the gut biome, and I would definitely encourage anyone on the spectrum to experiment dietarily for optimal brain function, I guess is the best way to put it. Because there are times, it's like, I even try CBD. It's like certain stuff just kind of help clear the mind a bit better. I think it's pretty common with people on the spectrum to just have so many, not necessarily tons of thoughts scatterbrained, but usually a fixation on certain things. I get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm super fixated. The most recent thing, obviously, is archery. Like, as I talk about, that's my most recent hobby, where I'm thinking about just one aspect of arrows. I'm super fixated on just what arrows to buy or something, and that's the forefront of my mind when I have so many other things that definitely are getting negated and require more attention at that point. And I know, like, when I definitely was more on the keto and definitely kind of experimenting with the probiotic system, kind of helping with the gut biome, because there was, man, I wish I could remember the book. I listened to it off of Libby, because I listened to that one, and the Dr. Peter Hotez book, Vaccines Didn't Give Sarah, I think it was called, yeah, he's, Dr. Peter Hotez, he's been on Joe Rogan and all those guys. He's very interesting gentleman. I think he's in Texas. He's not technically a virologist, but his specialty is obviously creating vaccines for very rare and very isolated jungle pathogens. Let's just put it that way. I mean, not only just pathogens and viruses, but also parasites. And that, I mean, that's a giant subject. I mean, maybe I should talk about my overall views on it. But maybe not today. Vaccines and causing autism and all that. But because here's the thing: we have autism, so let's just focus on that. What can we do to alleviate some of the negative aspects of autism? And so I highly recommend. This. I wish I could remember the name of the book. But it was fantastic to talk about specifically. Those that had great alleviation by um, fixing their diet, or I should say fixing their diet, but adding to their diet a good, healthy amount of probiotics and different gut biome stuff to just very interesting link connection with that of the gut biome to brain neurochemistry and function. So I would really encourage anyone on the spectrum to really look into that and experiment with that. Taking probiotics, pill capsule, dietary, with yogurts and whatnot. In the book, they actually talked about depository kind of style probiotic system, kind of get into that lower gut biome and to help with that. So maybe one of these days I can update the next episode and I can get that together because this is, these ramblings of mine are just kind of last minute and kind of when I feel like it. Yay! So anyway, thank you all for who have made it this far into the podcast, and very much appreciate it. So if you loved what you hear, share with a friend. If you hated what you heard, share with a friend of me. Anyway, this is Ballistic Autistic, and love y'all. I'll see you in the next episode.